Hi, thank you so much, Paul, and it's great to be here today. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and letting me introduce Chimeric Therapeutics to you. Next slide, please. Next slide, and maybe one more, please, Adrian. Thank you. So I'll just start by giving you a bit of a highlight or overview of Chimeric Therapeutics. We are a clinical stage cell therapy company. We are actually the only clinical stage cell therapy company on the ASX today. We currently have 3 clinical trials in progress, and we've already started to see early positive data from those trials. We have near-term milestones really around the development of our assets in clinic, and so these are clinical outcomes that we'll be looking at. And the assets we're developing in areas that have significant long-term commercial opportunity. And we're doing all of this with a very small but highly experienced team in this particular area. So let me give you a little bit of background into cell therapy. If you don't mind, next slide, please. When you think about oncology drugs, they've improved over the last 60, 70 years. Chemotherapy was a little bit like it just targeted nothing, and you basically were bombing everything and trying to kill anything inside a person, hoping the cancer would go along with that. In the 90s, we introduced targeted therapies, and for the first time, we were actually trying to target the tumor, and we did see that this actually enhanced patient survival, particularly in the short term a little bit. In the 2010s, we introduced immunotherapies, and immunotherapies actually, for the first time, were actually using a patient's own body to help target their cancer. And here we saw outcomes improve in the long term. Next slide. In 2017, we actually saw the first introduction of what we call CAR T cell therapies. And CAR T cell therapies, for the first time, showed the ability to actually cure patients with leukemia. And you see here highlighted some of these patients. These are patients that were treated with a one-time CAR T cell therapy and 10 years later remain completely cancer-free. Next slide. So as you can imagine, with those kinds of outcomes, cell therapy is actually anticipated to be the fastest growing market in oncology over the course of the next 5 years or so. Next slide. Chimeric is actually positioned with very unique assets that we're developing in this space. On the left-hand side, you see what we call autologous assets. These are very personalized assets. We make them by taking out a patient's blood, sending it to a manufacturing facility, engineering those cells to really work against that patient-specific cancer, and sending them back to that patient. We have 2 personalized or autologous CAR T cell therapies. The first, 1101, came to us from City of Hope and is currently being studied in a phase 1 clinical trial. And the second, 2101, came to us from the University of Pennsylvania, and we're looking to move that near term into a clinical trial as well. On the right-hand side, you see what we call our allogeneic therapies or our off-the-shelf therapies. So here what happens is a healthy donor actually donates their cells. We engineer them, we freeze them, and we put them on a shelf for readily available when patients come in. Our 0201 NK platform has been studied in a clinical trial with both solid tumors and blood cancers, and we've seen some incredible outcomes that I'll highlight in just a minute. Next slide. So I'll start with 1101. CHM 1101 actually right now targets patients with glioblastoma. Glioblastoma is unfortunately one of the most common types of brain cancer and the most lethal. Patients with glioblastoma generally are not expected to survive more than 12 to 15 months once diagnosed. And this asset actually really targets patients after they've had a first-line therapy and are coming back and their cancer has come back. This particular CAR T cell therapy has really been designed to help patients live longer. And if you can go to the next slide, please. It's currently being studied in a phase 1 clinical trial that you see highlighted here. What you see sort of in the escalation is what we call dose escalation in a clinical trial, where we slowly increase the dose a little bit more and a little bit more as we move up the different stages. And this really is to make sure that it's safe for patients. In this clinical trial, we've already completed the first 3 dose levels and are now working on enrolling patients in the 4th dose level. We've already seen what we believe is a very encouraging data from the first 2, the very lowest dose levels, where patients achieved 70% disease control that was actually held for up to 3.5 months and they didn't have any side effects at all. So very encouraging. With this, if you go to the next slide, we've been very excited to be able to now move on from that initial single site trial in California to opening a Chimeric-sponsored multi-site phase 1B clinical trial. And you see the design here. Part A is going to be 3 to 6 patients at our highest dose level. We'll then stop to do a safety and efficacy assessment, which we'll be sharing as one of our major milestones towards the end of this year. And as long as that looks positive, we'll be moving into dose expansion in 2024. So very exciting to have this trial open now and already enrolling in Austin, Texas. Next slide, please. This again, just highlighting some of the things that have been achieved with this asset this year and our data coming at the end of this year. Next slide. The next asset that I want to talk about is CHM 2101, and this is our second CAR T-cell therapy that came to us from the University of Pennsylvania. This again is a first-in-class CAR T-cell therapy, which means we are the very first people in terms of development, and so we're ahead of everybody else here. This is actually designed for patients with gastrointestinal tumors, so things like colorectal cancer, gastric cancer, neuroendocrine tumors, and that's really where we're targeting this asset's development. The team at the University of Pennsylvania is known as one of the top teams in the world to develop these types of therapy, and they've been optimizing this therapy for nearly a decade. Next slide. What we actually have seen to date is all of their preclinical data featured in one of the most prestigious cancer publications, Nature Cancer, and you see it highlighted here. And incredibly, what we saw was across 7 different types of cancer, we saw the exact same thing with this asset. Complete eradication of all cancer cells with absolutely no relapse and safety. So we're incredibly excited to be moving this asset into clinic shortly and really looking forward to being able to bring this to patients with gastrointestinal tumors. Next slide. The final part of our pipeline or portfolio is CHM 0201, and this is what I said was our off-the-shelf or allogeneic platform. And so this is the type of platform that we can build other things from. So it's a platform technology that gives us lots of optionality in the future, certainly across multiple disease areas, and there's easily sort of 10 plus disease areas in solid tumors and blood cancers that we can target this. We've excitingly already seen this in a phase 1A clinical trial where we've seen very promising clinical outcomes. Next slide. And you see those outcomes actually highlighted here. Importantly, what we saw in this trial was safety, and that's always paramount in a phase 1 clinical trial. We also saw what we call persistence and expansion. And essentially what that really means is the cells were staying alive in the patient's bodies long enough to be able to do their job. And then in the labs, we were able to grow them so that we had enough of them to actually help patients. We also saw efficacy here. In solid tumors, we saw 33% disease control, and in blood cancers, acute myeloid leukemia, we saw 100% disease control. What you see highlighted on the right is one of my favorite things to share. This is a patient that was actually treated with CHM 0201 and had a complete response. So all of her acute myeloid leukemia went away, and it has now not returned, and we're more than 2 years out since she was treated. So really exciting data and really promising with this patient. Next slide. What we've been able to do is take this asset into the next development stage, combining it with an asset called bactisertib, and we've now started this trial at Case Western in Ohio. So looking forward to seeing these outcomes in the next 12 months as well. Next slide. So across all of our assets, you see highlighted here the incredible opportunity that we have across multiple solid tumors and blood cancers, not only addressing unmet needs of cancer patients, but also very significant commercial opportunity. Next slide. And all of that really hinges on the team that you see highlighted here. This area requires a very specific type of expertise for development. And here we have a small team that has over 75 years of expertise in this particular type of cancer development. We've worked on 4 out of the 6 approved cell therapies in the world today. Next slide. So we've set ourselves out number of ambitious goals and milestones across 2023, and you can see we've achieved many of them already. As we head towards 24, we have equally ambitious milestones that we're looking to achieve. And maybe just the final slide, please. Highlighted here, really, you just see me bringing all of this together. We really believe that Chimeric offers an innovative, diversified pipeline. We've already seen early clinical promise. There are definitely near-term milestones and catalysts that we're looking forward to, and a team that has the proven experience and expertise to be able to really develop these therapies to bring them to life for more cancer patients. So I thank everybody for their time very much, and Paul would be happy to take any questions.
That was a great presentation, Jennifer. A question came in here. It came in one of your early slides. So the person said, this is an interesting therapy. Does it work with people who have compromised immune systems?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think a lot of clinical trials often exclude patients that have compromised immune systems. And I think, it's a little bit of a difficult question to answer without knowing a lot more detail. I think for some, but not for others. So certainly that's a question for the individual physician around what type of compromised immune system.
I got you. And Jennifer, the new phase 1B clinical trial for CHM 1101, why is that so exciting for Chimeric?
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting for us, Paul. It actually kind of marks a new chapter for us, right? The phase 1A trial was a single site trial at City of Hope. It was being run by the team at City of Hope. And so for us, I think we were always like, it's not going fast enough. We want to go faster and really see advancement. So for this, the phase 1B trial is now a Chimeric sponsored trial. So now we're in control of the trial, and it's importantly a multi-site trial. So our first site is in Austin, Texas, and it is part of the Sarah Cannon Research Institute network. And that's one of the biggest oncology research networks in the United States. So it really gives us the ability to take the trial forward in a better pace, and also to really be ready for that next phase of development. So we're excited to be here now.
Good to hear. And look, it's well renowned. The biotech sector globally has had a pretty tough 18 months, and it's the Chimeric share price has also been challenged over the last 6 months. What are your thoughts on the sector and on your share price? Are we at a turning point, do you think?
I absolutely believe we're at a turning point, and maybe I'll take both of those pieces. I think for Chimeric, certainly over the course of the last 2 months, there's definitely been, a question about our cash flow. Our recent funding announcements hopefully really puts us back into a position with investor confidence around being able to move forward now and focus more on our development. So I'm really hoping now we've turned that corner and we're able to focus back on the important things and the milestones in the development of the assets. Paul, you're absolutely right. The broader biotech segment has absolutely taken hits and continue to take hits. And, I think from that perspective, we all believe that we're starting to see life and see light at the end of the tunnel. We've really been focused on really just keeping our sort of foot on the gas to move our assets through development, continue to hit our milestones, and really be able to deliver on those things that take our assets into development, and really believe that as the market comes back, then we'll be in good shape as we've continued to develop.
Gotcha. Just a couple more here. What are the major risks, and are there competitors to your products?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, the 2 autologous CAR T-cell therapies that I talked about, 1101 and 2101, they're actually what we call first in class. And so one of the great and most exciting things for us is that we're leading the pack in development of those. And so right now, we do not know of any competitors. We're out and we have first in class assets. So that's really exciting in development. It does not happen often. And usually, the minute you start to take it into clinic and see good results, the pack will start behind you, but it's always nice to be out in front. And I think with these assets, the obvious risks in biotech development are the clinical trials. I think one of the challenges for young companies is always getting into clinic. For companies that are still in that preclinical stage, it can take 5, 6 years to get into clinic. And then once you're in clinic like we are now, then what you're really looking for is your asset safe. So really, is it, not hurting people? And then how much can it help people? So it's really just about making sure that it's safe and it really is helping people then.
Now, Jennifer, I know it's a very late hour where you are, so many thanks for taking the time at this late hour to present today, and we'd love to have you back on in the next few months. So, Jennifer, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It's great to see you.